What's up, everyone? Well, we're only a few weeks out from the Pacific Bonsai Expo, so today I thought I'd share just some last-minute show prep, as well as seeing if I can figure out how to set up this tree into a formal display. I already cleaned this up once earlier this summer, but I wanted to come back and just revisit it to make sure that I give it a final kind of polishing before the show. And this kind of entails, taking off dangling growth so that the bottoms of your pads are reasonably clean. So I'm both twisting and scissoring off small bits of foliage here that are hanging down underneath the line of the pad. This is, pretty common standard show technique or show prep technique. And so I'm just going to do this first, go through and just kind of remove foliage, anything, and also just removing foliage that is kind of sad looking, like the grayish green on here of foliage that has been getting a little bit too much shade. If this tree were not going into the show, I would probably be thinning it overall a little bit more, and I will also probably come back and do that right after the show so that the lower branches don't get shaded out too much over the winter when there's less light. So I don't know how well you guys can see it, but this tree actually has a lot of movement in the upper trunk. So it sort of, comes up here, heads off to the side, and then the trunk kind of goes back and then straight back over here to this elbow, and then back up that way and there to the top here. So I don't want all of that to be completely open. I want there to be some sort of like mystery to your eye where you have to kind of move your head around and look at it. So the front kind of facing me, as I look into it, I want to see hints of that movement, and the portions that are dead, the dead wood on this section really helps to draw your eye to it. So that was cleaned up and painted with lime sulfur quite a while ago, and I'm not going to touch that. The only thing I want to do to the portion of the trunk right now is I'll probably apply some denatured alcohol just to kill off the algae that has started to grow on both the bark and over the lime sulfur. But I'm still not done with the foliage. All right, a lot of times the changes that you make in show prep are relatively subtle. So all I've done here really is I did put a wire on here to round out this curve. The top had started to look slightly flat, and I've kind of cleaned out a little bit of foliage and just sort of moved a few things around, as well as creating a little bit of space underneath the pad so that you can appreciate these parts of the twigs wherever they are mature enough for that. The surface of the soil is probably the next thing that I really want to address. So I'm going to top scrape this and basically just remove all of this moss, re-slope the soil, and then I'm going to have to reapply moss, which I won't be able to do today. So I'll just put some sphagnum moss on there. I put the backdrop down so you guys can see this a little bit better. And one of the things in top scraping this that I'm trying to accomplish is to reduce the volume of the pot and soil mound that I have here. So it's mounded up a little bit, which is pretty common for this shape of pot. But I've got this kind of big shoulder here, which makes it from the front have a lot more volume than it actually has. So I've gone in and reduced the soil here along the edge. That'll give me space to put on fresh moss, and I'm gonna have to go out and collect that myself. I'm just applying sort of a light layer of this, which I will leave underneath the live green moss that I do, that I apply when I'm actually finishing it for the show. But for now, this will just keep the surface of the soil a little bit more moist, so that the roots that are right here on the surface don't dry out quite as easily. Obviously, those are going into the old moss that I just scraped off, and so I'm just gonna, essentially, you're sort of kind of creating an environment as if it was a slightly deeper pot by adding this top dressing that retains more moisture at the surface. All right, well, formal display is altogether simple and complicated, and I'm obviously not going to be able to cover all of it here, but we're just going to work on this display. So I've got a table set up here with enough space to do this, but it's actually a 5-foot table, and the display spaces at the expo will be 6 feet. The same depth though, 30 inches is a standard folding table. So I've set the main tree here, but what I need to do is get both a secondary tree and an accent plant. Now, if this was a big tree, this tree is only about 18 inches tall from the rim of the pot to the top of the foliage. The gin doesn't count in terms of the height. So if it was a large tree, it might be displayed just by itself with like a large accent plant. But I'm going to try a 3-point display here, which involves a secondary tree. Now, the choice of the secondary tree can be really complicated, but this is a traditional species. It's a Kishu Chinese juniper, and it's actually grafted onto a different type of juniper trunk. This was a collected Percumbens nana trunk from an old garden. Because this is a conifer, evergreen, I'm going to look for a deciduous tree to put here, and that deciduous tree will complement this without competing with it, and that's the traditional way to go. Now, if I don't have a good deciduous tree, I could still use just an accent plant in this space. Okay, so I'm going to start with this little Zelkova that I have and just put it onto this little kind of slab. Now, I'm going to stand back and kind of think about what I see here and whether or not the relationship between the two trees is interesting, as well as the differential in the heights and whatnot. So as a first attempt, I think this is not bad, and I haven't put the accent plant here, but it would be very small because it's meant to kind of sit in between the two, and generally you don't want it to compete size-wise with the smaller of the two trees. Let's try something different. I actually have a couple of other stands that I can use for this. The convention with a round pot is that you would have either a round stand or a square stand and not use a rectangular stand. And it's kind of an interesting convention. I actually am not sure exactly why, but it's probably some sort of artistic principle that comes out. So I'm gonna go ahead and stick this on a taller stand that is square. All right, well, I think that's pretty obviously too tall right off the bat, even if I bring the camera up here to kind of like my eye level. This is not the style of tree that stand is really intended for, and it's actually, the pot is a little bit too big for the stand. I like the weight of the stand, the visual weight of the stand. In other words, like the thickness of the legs and the thickness of the other pieces of wood that make up the stand, but I don't like the height of that particular stand with this tree. So let me try another one. So this stand is probably closer to a good height for the tree. I think it's actually a little bit too tall still. But the thing I don't like about it is, even though right here, sort of this, the lip of the pot and the base of the pot should be within that square that's on the stand right there, the center square traditionally. So even though that's the case and it fits relatively well in that square in this case, I think that the I think that the legs and the volume of wood in this stand, and I'm ignoring the fact that the stand's not in very good condition, but I think that the size of the legs and the size of the top here, the visual weight of all of this overpowers the visual weight of the tree. So it's really too heavy visually to make a really good display. So I'm going to look for something that is a little bit lighter, sort of like the last one, but not quite that tall. This is a non-traditional stand, obviously. It's something that I made myself, and I really like it, but I don't think it will be suitable for this tree. And first off, the thing that makes it not suitable is that it's a rectangular stand, and putting a round pot onto a rectangular stand often just doesn't look quite right, and I'm not really sure why, like I said before. So the positive aspects of this are, I think that the height here is pretty good. I like that height for the tree. I also like that it sets the tree up at a good viewing height for most adults, and the differential between the secondary tree and the primary tree is also not overly well, I'm not sure about it actually. This tree, the secondary tree, probably needs a little bit taller stand. Obviously not as tall as that one, but it definitely needs a little bit taller stand in order to round out the composition. That's all the stands that I have that would even be remotely close for this. So I'm going to have to go out and check with some of my friends and fellow bonsai enthusiasts to try to find the right stand for this tree. And probably what I'm looking for is a round stand that's a little bit shorter than this, or a short cascade stand that has a light sort of feeling like this one does in terms of the visual weight. And when I find that, I will hopefully have the perfect stand for this tree. And one of the things that in Bay Island Bonsai Club that I used to go to, every month we would practice a display like this, and it became obvious relatively quickly that you can never have too many stands to create good displays. And so sharing stands, loaning stands, or renting stands, whatever the case may be, ends up being something that is really useful for optimizing your display parameters. So to round this out, I've put a small Jita, this little piece of wood here is called Jita, in the display, and added this small accent plant. And when I went onto my yard to look for an accent plant that was about the right size, it made me realize that I really don't have an accent plant that's the right size for this display, which means that I need to either perk up the ones that I have that look a little bit tired, or figure out something else. So for this exercise, using this is going to work, but it might actually be a little bit big. I think it's okay, but it might be a little bit big. If we put this up on a slightly taller stand, that will help. And I'm hoping that this tree will actually either be in fall color for the exhibit, and if not, if the leaves are not looking great, then I would actually remove all of them so that you can just appreciate the winter silhouette. All right, well, if you have a stand you want to loan me for this, let me know, and otherwise I'm going to be out there searching. And if you want to see more formal displays and really kind of learn how to, well, at least get some good examples of the way that these things are put together, I encourage you to come to the Pacific Bonsai Expo. We've sold a lot of tickets, and I would encourage you, if you don't have one already, to come on Sunday, because it will not be quite as crowded. That's Sunday, November 13th, 2022. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.